Hey there, my Pantheon guide will cover every encounter in the Gauntlet, which will be broken up into timestamps that you can see below in the video timeline. At the end of the video, I'll have brief recommended DPS builds for each class. Here we go! Your first encounter is Argos, Planetary Core. First, let's familiarize yourself with the encounter area. The entire map is divided up into 3 main sections, where for the most part, you can walk around freely if you wish. Each section will also have a triangular plate on the floor that will be either purple, orange, or blue, aka Void, Solar, or Arc. Basically, you should think of this as the Arc section, this as the Void section, and this as the Solar section. You can travel from section to section by just jumping across a few floating platforms, but be careful to not fall off the map. As the encounter begins, you should divide your team into 3 groups of 2. Each of them should kind of patrol one section of the map, with any and all players ready to temporarily wander off to grab a Vex Cranium. More on those in a minute. The boss, Argos, will be floating in the dead center of the area, protected by a large shield that you will need to power down before the damage phase can begin. When the encounter begins, look up at Argos. On one particular side of his shield, you will see 3 different elemental orbs. These can be any combination of Void, Arc, or Solar. It could be one of each element, as seen here, but not always. See right over here, we have 2 Arc orbs and 1 Solar orb. It'll always be random, so whoever has a full view of all 3 elemental orbs, be sure to call out what those elements are to the rest of the team. The element of each of those 3 orbs determines what type of Vex Craniums you will need to create, which you will eventually use to power down Argos' shield. In this particular example, his orbs were 1 Solar and 2 Arc, so my team is going to need 1 Solar Cranium and 2 Arc Craniums. But wait a minute, what the hell are Vex Craniums? Good question. They are small Vex items you can pick up from killing unique yellow bar enemies called malignant hobgoblins who spawn out on the floating platforms in between each of the 3 main sections of the map. When you kill the hobgoblin and pick up the cranium, it won't have an element associated with it just yet. You have to take the cranium and bring it back to any of the 3 main sections of the map and dunk the cranium into one of the corners of the elemental plate. For example, right here, I take the Vex Cranium over to the Solar side of the map and dunk it into one of the corners on the Solar plate. After waiting about 20 seconds or so, now look, the cranium has finished baking in the oven, so to speak, and it is now a Solar Vex Cranium. In the original Argos fight, way back when, you could bake many craniums, which was actually encouraged. The reason it was a good idea to bake a whole bunch was because you could use them for extra DPS. But now though, in Pantheon, you'll only be given 3 craniums per damage phase, so don't grab them and just bake whatever element you want willy-nilly. You should bake exactly the right elements that you need to break Argos' shield. Now, I'm sure that if you burn through another cranium, another hobgoblin may eventually spawn, but I wouldn't really risk it. I would say bake only what you need to break his shield. Okay, when the 3 correct craniums have been created, have your fire team grab all of them and head to the side of Argos' shield where the 3 elemental balls are all in view. With 3 guardians holding 1 cranium each, do a 3, 2, 1 countdown, and then the cranium holders can shoot their beams at the matching elemental ball, which will then move towards the center of the shield. When all 3 balls have been pushed into the very center, the shield will finally power down, and it's almost DPS time, but not yet. Before DPS, you now have to prevent him from completing his wipe mechanic, which will kill the fire team if left unchecked. Large rings will appear in the air surrounding Argos. Jump up onto the nearest one. Now, Argos will have 6 different spots on his body that are glowing white. 2 are on his arms, which you can see right here and right here. 2 are up on the very top of his body, which you can see up here and up here. The final 2 are on his back, which if we go behind Argos, you can see right here and right here. Now, the good news is, even though there are 6 glowing spots on his body, you only need to shoot and break 2. And more good news, they can be whichever ones you want. Some teams I play with like starting off by shooting and breaking both glowing spots on his arms, but I know that some other teams actually like to break 1 arm and 1 on top of his body. The benefit of doing that is that you don't have to really rotate around Argos to break both. If we take a look at this picture one more time, if we stand where Bife is currently standing, we can shoot both his arm here and the one on top of his body, because we have a clear sight line on both. But it's up to you and your team. Do whatever you want. Either way, when you've shot and broken 2 spots, you have prevented the wipe mechanic, and DPS will now begin. I strongly recommend doing DPS while you're still standing on the floating ring in front of Argos. Yeah, you can jump off of the rings and DPS him from the ground, which I did originally, but honestly, kind of a waste of time. DPSing him while you're still on the rings in front of him, honestly, is just way faster. So DPS begins, and you should shoot him in the face, but be sure to avoid a very unique attack that he has, which we will pause the footage right now. It looks like that. If you get touched by that weird-looking vexed triangle projectile, you will be trapped, unable to move, and you'll actually start floating away off the battlefield. Now, while this is very funny, it is obviously something you want to avoid. If you are trapped in this prison during DPS or any other part of the Argos encounter, call for help immediately so your teammates can shoot and break you free. Anyway, keep DPSing Argos until you can't anymore, and then it is just rinse and repeat from the top. Remember though, the next time you have to DPS, the glowing spots on Argos that you already broke will stay broken, so plan ahead on which 2 new parts of his body you are going to shoot before DPS. Again, DPS loadout recommendations will be at the end of the video, so skip there if you want, but just keep at it until Argos is dead. Your next fight will be Ghalran the Sorrow Bearer. Let's familiarize yourself with the area. This very small encounter is triangle shaped, with each corner of that triangle featuring a clone of the boss standing around in the back. Once again, your fire team should divide themselves into 3 teams of 2, and each team should be prepared to defend their little section of the map and deal with the boss clone standing in the back. Before the fight even begins, each team should decide which of the 2 of them should be the first one to grab a unique buff called Witch's Blessing. I'll explain why in a minute, but when the encounter begins, a green pool will appear on the floor where the rally flag was, and anyone standing in that pool for basically more than 1 second will be granted the Witch's Blessing buff. Again, 1 player from each team should start the encounter standing in that pool and getting the buff. What does Witch's Blessing do? Great question. It does 2 good things and 1 bad thing. Good thing number 1, it lets you kill certain hive. As the encounter unfolds, hive will repeatedly spawn into the map to harass you, but the thing is, you'll notice that some of them are straight up immune to your gunfire. In a nutshell, half the hive you encounter will only take damage from a player with the Witch's Blessing buff, and the other half of the hive you encounter will only take damage from a player who doesn't have the Witch's Blessing buff. Therefore, between you and your partner, as long as one of you has the buff and the other one doesn't, the both of you will be able to basically kill all hive in your area on the map. Good thing number 2, the Witch's Blessing buff will eventually help you de-shield and kill the mini Ghalrans who eventually spawn in and chase you around the map. More on that later. But here's the bad thing that it does. You will notice that your Witch's Blessing buff has a countdown timer. When it gets all the way down to 0 and you're still holding it, your Guardian will die. Therefore, what you and your partner are going to end up doing is passing the Witch's Blessing buff back and forth between one another, essentially playing a never-ending game of hot potato. Here's how to pass the buff to your partner. If you look around the map, you will notice these large purple globes. There are 3 of them on the map, roughly located here, here, and here. Basically, they're on the border between every section. To pass the Witch's Blessing buff over to your partner, the both of you need to stand directly next to the orb, and both of you need to shoot it. The buff will then transfer over to your teammate, and the timer will refresh all the way back up to 1 minute. I'd say that if you're at around 15 seconds left on your Witch's buff timer, you and your partner should really stop what you're doing and go swap your Blessing buff real quick. You gotta keep an eye on that timer a lot. I should also mention that if for whatever reason another player on your team needs a new Witch's Blessing buff, maybe if they died or something, you can actually clone your Witch's Blessing buff. To do this, the person without the buff who needs it should stand directly next to the purple orb and shoot the orb, while the player with the Witch's Blessing buff should shoot the purple orb from far away. By doing it that way, you don't swap the buff, but you actually clone it onto the other player. Alright, after a few waves of ad clear, eventually, mini Ghalran clones will appear on the map. Not all at once, they will show up in one section of the map at a time. You won't be able to shoot them to death, but rather you get rid of them in the following way. You need to lure them up to the top of the stairs in your area. They basically need to be standing in front of the large boss in the corner of your section of the map. When you've lured them there, they need to be meleeed by both one player with the Witch's Blessing buff and by one player without the Witch's Blessing buff, aka they basically need to be meleeed about the same time by both you and your partner. When you've both meleeed him, he will de-shield and basically be stunned in place wherever he is. Immediately after you've done that, turn to face the giant Ghalran in your area and start shooting his hand, which should now be glowing bright green. Keep shooting that green hand until you can't anymore, and when you've done that, the big Ghalran will summon a huge axe and ground pound directly in front of him, killing the mini Ghalran clone. Each team on each section of the map will have to do this. Take note that after you and your teammate have meleeed the mini Ghalran, whichever one of you had the Witch's Blessing buff will lose that buff. At that point, you can ask another player on the map to clone their Witch's buff onto you in the way that we talked about earlier. That way, one of you will still be able to damage the potentially immune hive in the area as they continue to spawn in. It's really important you don't forget to do this, by the way, because if everyone on the fire team loses the Witch's Blessing buff, your team is kinda effed, so try to not forget. Just remember, after the mini Ghalran is dead, maybe try to get somebody right away to clone their Witch's buff back onto you. Anyway, after the 3 mini Ghalrans have been crushed to death by a big axe, each big Ghalran on the map will begin a wipe mechanic. Their hands will glow green and start to raise up into the air. You and your partner need to shoot down both green glowing hands until they both go all the way down, and after you've done that, you should both shoot Ghalran directly in the face. If he vanishes, then congratulations, your Ghalran was basically a clone. However, one Ghalran on the map will not be a clone. When your fire team finds the real Ghalran, the one that did not vanish after being shot in the face, your entire fire team should congregate there in front of that Ghalran for DPS. After you swap your Witch's Blessing buff one more time with your partner, of course. Now, DPS begins, and you're kinda doing the same thing you just did. When Ghalran raises his glowing hands, you should all shoot both of them until they go all the way down, and when they do, shoot the bejesus out of his face. That is how you damage him. Continue doing this until he is immune, and then once again, shoot his glowing green hands until they go down. That is all the DPS phase is, by the way. Shoot him in the face until you can't anymore, and then shoot his green hands until they go all the way down, and return to shooting him in the face. It's important to remember that during DPS phase, you still have to worry about your Witch's Blessing buff. Ideally, you and your partner should have swapped one last time before the DPS phase began, just so you don't really have to worry about it while dealing DPS. When the damage phase is over, everyone should return to their original section and take it from the top. Really, as long as you and your teammates are on the ball in terms of swapping your Witch's buff back and forth, y'all should be made in the shade. Keep going until Ghalran is dead. By the way, before we get to the next boss encounter, Father's Day is coming up, and you're not planning on getting him another coffee mug, are you? Good, because if your dad is anything like mine, he could probably stand to have a lot less caffeine. Anyway, get him a gift he'll actually use with the sponsor of today's video, Raycon. Raycon's bone conduction headphones are an easy layup for Father's Day and make sense for any dad who likes to stay active, whether that's walks, golf, biking, workouts, or just getting outside whenever he can. The bone conduction headphones sit just outside of your ears instead of actually being in them, so you can have music or a podcast going while still hearing everything going on around you. I have my own pair. Raycon sent them to me, obviously, but I still use them all the time, mainly in the kitchen for cooking, but I've also used them when doing yard workout in the backyard. They're rock solid. They have 13 hours of battery life, and they're also IP68 waterproof and dust proof. So even if your dad wants to take a multi-hour walk around the neighborhood in a rainstorm, he'll be fine to listen to whatever he wants to along the way. The best part of all, there is a 30-day happiness guarantee with these bad boys, so you quite literally have nothing to lose. Upgrade your dad's workout routine. Go to buyraycon.com/falloutbc to get 15% off your order, and thank you again to Raycon for sponsoring today's video. All right, next up is Emperor Calus, and man, is this fight fun. Let's familiarize yourself with the area. There are actually 2 sections of the map. The first is the throne room, where you and your team will begin the encounter fighting wave after wave of Cabal. You may also notice that there are 4 elevated plates where scions will eventually spawn. Looking at the map of the throne room, each scion will spawn here, and each will have a symbol above their head that that never changes. Either a cup, axes, a dog, or a sun. More on those later. After enough time goes by in the throne room, Calus will clap his hands and send the entire fire team to the second area of the map, the Shadow Realm. The Shadow Realm is weird. Calus's giant head will be floating at the far end of the area, and a powerful vacuum effect will eventually begin to pull all players towards him forever. 3 players on your fire team can voluntarily choose to return to the throne room by jumping over the tiny purple speed bump on the floor and touching a small purple orb. Those orbs go away when you touch them, by the way, so you and your team should decide in advance which 3 players are going to voluntarily return to the throne room, and out of those 3 players, who will touch which orb. Sounds kind of dumb, but you really don't want 2 players jumping at the same orb because it may result in someone getting sucked off into the abyss forever. So again, your fire team should be divided up into 2 teams. 3 players who will touch the purple orbs and return to the throne room, with the 3 other players voluntarily remaining in the Shadow Realm. Let's start off with Team Throne Room for a minute. After returning, Team Throne Room will briefly spend some time killing more adds, but eventually they'll have to lock in and focus on the 4 scions in the room, again, each standing on top of a different plate. In a nutshell, you'll have to melee one of the 4 scions to death relatively quickly, because if you don't, the entire fire team will wipe and die. Meleeing the wrong scion is also really bad, because if the wrong scion is killed, Team Shadow Realm gets dicked over in the form of the next purple speed bump not appearing and everybody getting sucked off into the abyss. So how do you know which is the correct scion to melee? That information is provided to you by Team Shadow Realm. Team Shadow Realm will be trying their best to not get sucked into the vacuum of outer space by hugging this small purple speed bump on the floor. If they look at Calus's giant head, they'll each see a different symbol appearing on his forehead, which they should say out loud on the mic. Basically, whichever symbol does not get called out by Team Shadow Realm, the scion with that symbol floating above them in the throne room needs to be meleeed and killed. For example, here I am in the throne room killing adds and staying alive. I hear my teammates in the Shadow Realm call out cup, axes, and dog. The symbol they did not call out was sun, so I find the scion with the sun above his head. I run over and melee him to death. GG. After that happens, Team Shadow Realm will now see a new purple speed bump up ahead of them. They can carefully jump over the one they're hugging right now and get pulled forward to hug the new purple speed bump. Again, be very careful doing this, Team Shadow Realm. If you hit a weird patch on the floor that looks like a ramp, you will very likely get launched off into the abyss and die. That entire process will basically happen 3 times, aka Team Shadow Realm will read off the symbols they see on Calus's forehead, and then they will advance a little bit and do it again, and they'll advance a little bit and do it again. Meaning, of course, Team Throne Room will have to melee and kill the correct scion 3 different times. And the scions respawn, by the way, so it's not like the scions slowly whittle away. There's going to be 4 options to choose from each time. Alrighty, after the correct scion has been meleeed 3 times, Team Shadow Realm will see something weird. Calus opening his mouth and coughing up hundreds of tiny skulls. Team Shadow Realm's job is now to shoot and destroy as many of these as they can. Every time you shoot and destroy a skull, the higher the number your Force of Will buff will get at the top of your screen. This is actually a damage buff that will help you do more damage to Calus during DPS, so getting that number as high as you can is definitely important. Meanwhile, in the throne room, players will notice Calus shining very brightly. This is a wipe mechanic, and they'll have to start shooting him and taking down his shield to prevent the entire fire team from dying. Take note though, not to take his shield down too fast, because when you de-shield him completely and stop the wipe mechanic, you also stop tiny skulls from spawning in the Shadow Realm. I'd recommend that Team Throne Room gets Calus's shield down fairly low and then stop shooting him, waiting for the Force of Will buff to maybe hit 75 or higher, and then finish shooting and breaking his shield. When you've broken his shield and stopped the wipe mechanic, Team Shadow Realm will be teleported back into the throne room, and now it's time for DPS. DPS. For DPS, your team will need to stand on one of the 4 plates that the Scions were standing on. It'll basically happen like so. Your team will stand on the plate and damage Calus until you can't anymore, indicated by getting immune text when you try to shoot him, and then you'll all collectively move on to the next plate. I should mention that near the end of each plate phase, Calus will whip out a gun and shoot the plate everybody is standing on. I have to imagine that on higher levels of difficulty, you should really get off the plate before he shoots, but at standard low-level difficulty, it really shouldn't scare you. You'll probably be fine. Most times I run the Calus encounter, my team likes to start DPS on this plate here, the one closest to Calus on the right-hand side. From there, we like to move clockwise, going to the back right, then to the back left, and then finally to the front left. Also, for the very first damage plate, don't jump up onto the plate until everybody on the fire team is there and ready to go. If one person jumps up onto the plate early, the DPS window will officially begin. So again, only jump up onto that first plate when everybody is ready. At the beginning of DPS, you should be aiming at Calus's head. However, as he starts to fall apart, revealing that you're actually fighting a robot, you should now aim at the crit spot on his robot chest. Keep doing DPS until you can't anymore, and then it is rinse and repeat from the top. Eventually, when Calus's health bar is completely gone during a DPS phase, don't celebrate just yet. He'll now enter final stand mode, and he'll have a thin gray health bar. Just keep shooting him until he officially goes down for good, and be quick about it, because if you don't kill him here, he will wipe your entire fire team. Good luck and kill that robot dead. Alright, next up is the Warpriest, who is way more cut than I remember. Dear lord. If you've ever done the King's Fall raid before, know that this encounter is now basically a quasi-new hybrid encounter made up of both the Death Totem encounter and the Warpriest boss fight. They've kind of been mashed together into one big encounter. Let's familiarize ourselves with the area. There are basically 2 sections of the encounter. In the lower section, there are 2 side rooms, each containing a large plate beneath a hive Death Totem. In between those 2 side rooms is the Warpriest. He'll be harassing your team as you try to work, and you should just do your best to ignore him at the beginning of the encounter. In the upper section of the area is where DPS will eventually take place. There are 3 glowing green plates on the floor, one in the middle, which is easy to get to, one on the right, which is also easy to get to, and one on the left, which is mildly annoying to get to because you have to jump your way up to a balcony to get there. Your goal, in a nutshell, is for one Guardian at a time to gather a lot of the Deathsinger's power buff, which is obtained by killing Hive while standing on the plate underneath a Death Totem, and then run with that buff into the DPS room and deposit it into one of the green plates. You will do that repeatedly until DPS begins. Let's divide your team into 2 groups of 3. 3 of you will essentially be running a relay race on the left side of the encounter, and the other 3 will be running the exact same relay race on the right side of the encounter. The encounter should begin by 1 player on the left and 1 player on the right side team doing a 3-2-1 countdown and then grabbing their own Brand of the Weaver, which is a small black orb that spawns both here and here on your map. When you pick that up, you'll notice a timer at the very top of your HUD counting down. More on that later. Once they have the brand, they should immediately run as fast as they can to the far end of their side rooms and stand on the plate beneath the Death Totem. It's important that they remain there, because if a player is not standing underneath a Death Totem for more than 10 seconds, give or take, the entire fire team will wipe and die. While these players are standing underneath the totem to prevent the team wipe, they should try to kill as many Hive in the room as they can. Again, reason being is the more Hive the brand carrier kills, the more stacks they gain of Deathsinger's power, which you can see on the left-hand side of your HUD. Alright, back to the Brand of the Weaver timer at the top of your HUD. If that timer ever reaches 0, you will die. Therefore, it's up to one of your teammates to run into the room and essentially relieve you, both by taking your Brand of the Weaver to prevent you from dying and to take your place under the Death Totem. Sounds easy enough, but they can only take the Brand of the Weaver buff from you if they have a special buff themselves, which we'll get to in just a minute. But for right now, let's say your teammate has run into the totem room and taken the Brand of the Weaver from you. Your job is now to run out of the totem room, go into the other section of the encounter, and then find and stand on one of the 3 small green plates. My team likes to start with the very middle plate because, again, it is very easy to reach. While standing on the little green plate, you'll notice on the left-hand side of your HUD that your Deathsinger's power number is now slowly going down. You're essentially depositing it very slowly into the plate. When you've deposited all of your Deathsinger's power into the plate, you now have a very specific job, which is to look around the DPS room and find a Hive Wizard. There should be one on the far left side of the room and one on the far right. Shoot and kill the wizard, and immediately after it dies, a taken knight will spawn nearby. Kill the taken knight and he will drop a small taken orb. Grab that, and now you should have a buff called Brand Claimer. Now remember earlier when I said that while you were standing on the death totem plate, your teammate could only relieve you if they had a certain buff? The Brand Claimer is that buff. So now you can head all the way back to where you started, your original death totem room. One of your teammates will be standing there on the plate holding it down, and it is now up to you to come in and relieve them. Basically, every guardian on the team is doing the exact same job. You all just start the encounter at different points in the relay race. On your own little team of 3, one guardian starts off grabbing the brand and standing on the death totem plate. Another guardian starts off killing the first hive wizard and then the first taken knight to grab the Brand Claimer buff, and the third guardian kinda does ad clear for like a minute or so until they find and kill the next hive wizard and then the next taken knight. Again, everyone is just taking turns doing the exact same thing in the relay race. It is very important to mention that when you have the Brand Claimer buff and you're running into the totem room to relieve your teammate standing under the totem, that you do not just instantly run up to them and yoink their brand right away. You should instead ask them how much time they have left on their timer. If they and you both have a lot of time left on your respective timers, then you should just chill there with them as they kill hive until one of your timers is low, maybe around 5 seconds or so. Then you should grab their brand and tell them they may now leave. The reason you don't want to yoink the brand right away is because if you go too fast, you'll be in a situation where you're going to be waiting to be relieved under your death totem with the timer getting lower and lower, but your other teammate is nowhere near ready to come and relieve you because you were just going too fast. So communicate with your totem guy and don't yoink their brand until one of your timers is close to expiring. Your team is going to keep doing this for a while, maybe 2 or 3 full rotations, depositing your Deathsinger's power over and over. If you're wondering how close you are until DPS phase, you can take a look at the large doorway between both sections of the map. Your progress can be measured by how high the glowing hive runes are along the edge of the doorway. When the glowing runes reach the top, it is DPS time, but you don't have to watch the door at all because eventually you'll get text on your HUD that says, "The Warpriest deems you worthy." When you see that, everybody should stop what they're doing and head into the DPS room. Very important, by the way, when your team has collectively deposited a lot of Deathsinger's power into the green plate and you're feeling like you're close to DPS time, make sure that the next time Guardians are depositing their power into the plate to be on high alert and get ready to get the fuck off the plate the second it becomes full and you see the Warpriest deems you worthy. This is crucial because the moment you become worthy, the green plate where you're depositing your power will suddenly turn red. And if you stay on the plate too long, not paying attention, you will automatically pick up the Brand of the Initiate, which basically triggers DPS. It's not the end of the world if you grab it too early, but your team's damage will suffer because DPS will have potentially started before half your team has even entered the room. Again, the play is to be on high alert when you're close to DPS, and then when you're worthy and see the plate go red, get off it immediately. That way you can wait for the rest of your fire team to enter the room, and then one person runs through the red plate to grab the Brand of the Initiate and officially begin DPS. My team usually likes to take the Brand of the Initiate right up onto the stage with the Warpriest, but you can damage him from wherever you want. Just make sure the entire team bunches up on the brand holder. During DPS, the brand holder will notice a timer at the top of their HUD counting down. When it reaches 0, you guessed it, they will die. So during DPS, you'll need to have another member of your team take the brand from them before they die. However, they can only do so if they have the Brand Claimer buff, which they'll need to get from a taken knight just like before. Basically, right as your team has been deemed worthy, 2 players on your fire team should immediately volunteer to find the 2 taken knights in the DPS room and kill them so they can grab the Brand Claimer buff in advance. Ideally, those 2 guardians who volunteer have remaining Deathsinger's power that they have not yet dunked. Reason being, we learned that if a guardian with leftover Deathsinger's power grabs the red brand from their teammate during DPS, it essentially extends the red brand's countdown timer, which is great. So during DPS, the player with the red brand, aka Brand of the Initiate, should start counting out their brand timer on the mic, ideally when it reaches around 10 or so seconds remaining. Then, one of the 2 teammates that has killed a taken knight and grabbed the Brand Claimer buff can yoink the red brand off of the guy holding it before the countdown hits 0. Then that guy counts down their brand timer and a second teammate takes it before it hits 0, and all this time your entire team is shooting the Warpriest right in the face. Eventually, you won't be able to damage the Warpriest anymore, and the entire room will begin to turn bright white. When that happens, everyone needs to stop DPS and collectively hide together behind one of the 3 large pillars in the room. There should be one in the middle and one on the right, and then one up on the left, which is kinda annoying to get to. Make sure the pillar is between you and the Warpriest and hide behind it. You are basically protecting yourself from a wipe mechanic. When you're done, take it all from the top, but keep in mind that after hiding behind a pillar to avoid the wipe mechanic, that pillar will vanish. Basically meaning the next time you have to hide from another wipe mechanic, you'll need to choose a different pillar. That's kinda it. Remember to take your time with brand swapping and call out your brand timer during the DPS window, and you should be a-okay. Good luck. Alright, next up is the Consecrated Mind, and I have to warn you right now, this one might be difficult for a lot of teams just because there is a lot going on, but I have a huge tip that is going to save you a ton of time. Like the Warpriest, this encounter is basically a quasi-new hybrid encounter, aka it kinda takes 2 encounters and mashes them together. Let's familiarize ourselves with the area. This encounter area is large and is in the shape of a diamond. There are 5 large totems in the area, one on each corner of the diamond and one in the very middle. There are also many teleporters all over the area, including 4 new ones which take you directly to the middle of the map. Once a totem has been turned on, and we'll talk about how to do that in a minute, the nearby teleporters will also be turned on, and players can then teleport from one corner of the map to another instantly, and again, you can even teleport to the middle area too. You'll be using these a lot. Just try not to get too turned around when going through the teleporter. Be aware that some teams out there might use different callouts, but I like to go with the baseball callouts, aka first base over here, second base over here, third base over there, and home plate right here. The middle we just call middle no matter what though, but you do you. Your goal of the encounter is to activate the DPS phase by dunking enough Vex motes into a dunking depot located at the very middle of the map. The Vex enemies who carry these motes are rare, and while you wait for them to show up, you will spend the vast majority of your time defending the 5 totems. They must be defended constantly from the Vex, who are programmed to approach the totem and then sacrifice themselves to the totem. If too many Vex sacrifice themselves at your totem, you will fail and the entire fire team will wipe. What makes the encounter tricky is that some of the Vex that show up to the totems to sacrifice themselves are protected by a unique white shield. Players will only be able to break this shield if they have a unique buff called Enlightened, which will show up at the top of your screen. The majority of this encounter is making sure both you and your teammates are all refreshing your buffs in a timely manner so you can stop all the Vex trying to sacrifice at the totems, even the ones protected by a white shield. Let's talk about how to refresh the Enlightened buff. And for the love of God, if you're a veteran player who has played Garden of Salvation before, do not skip this part. I'm going to give you a tip that'll change your life. Anyway, there are 2 ways to refresh your Enlightened buff. The first and traditional way of doing so is to shoot the tiny floating Vex cube near your totem, which will then connect itself to you with a tiny beam of light if you are close enough. Because the beam of light isn't very long, you and another player will need to both link together and connect the light to the nearby totem. Doing so will refresh the Enlightened buff timer for both players. Even though this is now the, quote, less efficient way of refreshing your buff timer, your team will need to use that method at least once on each of the 5 totems on the map, because that is how you turn on all the teleporters that make traveling around way easier. I recommend when the encounter begins, you turn on the totem at home plate, and then 1 player remains there, and the remaining 5 go to the middle to turn that totem on. Then 1 of the 5 remains in the middle, while the other 4 players branch out to both first and third base. Then finally, 2 of those players go ahead and meet up at the second base totem. When you've done that, all totems and teleporters will be online. As I mentioned though, once all the totems are powered up, there is a second and new way to refresh your Enlightened buff, and it's a total lifesaver. When 2 Guardians tether together in the very center of the map and refresh the middle totem, then any Guardian on the map who is currently tethered to a Vex cube, not their totem, just the cube, will get their Enlightened buff timer refreshed automatically. Check the example here. Here I am on home plate completely alone, but I hear my teammates in the middle of the map are preparing to tether up to the totem in the very center. I tether myself to the floating Vex cube, Again, I am not connected to my totem at all. My teammates in the center of the map refresh their buff timer, and boom, my enlightened buff has also refreshed as well. This is a tip that a lot of players did not know about on day one of Pantheon. I told my good buddy Dado about it while we were running Pantheon days later for extra footage, and completely blew his mind. You don't need to rely on what my team now calls the remote refresh tactic though for 100% of the encounter. There might be some times where somebody needs to come through a teleporter to help you clear ads or whatever, and you decide to refresh the old-fashioned way. But again, this is a massively handy shortcut that will help a lot of teams get more organized. I strongly recommend that your team does the remote refresh tactic in the following way. Take your two most consistent players on the team and assign them to the following roles: middle totem defender and roaming helper, which I'll elaborate more on roles later. During the fight though, you will occasionally hear a unique sound cue that sounds like this. Right after you hear that, you'll see text in your HUD that reads, "Undergrowth defenses subsided." That is the game telling you that you now have a brief window of time where no new Vex will spawn in, at least for a couple of seconds. When you see that text, the middle totem defender and the roaming helper should call out to the rest of the team that they are about to do a remote refresh, basically indicating that anybody who wants to get their enlightened buff refreshed remotely should now prepare and link themselves to their Vex cube. Then, doing a very loose 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown, the middle defender and the free roamer can tether together, refresh the middle totem buff, which again will remotely rebuff any player on the map currently tethered to their Vex cube. As long as you keep your eye peeled for the undergrowth defenses subsided text, you can get into a real good rhythm for doing this. And by the way, make sure that anytime you see an angelic hydra near your totem, kill it immediately. Reason being is them existing near your totem will temporarily block off access to your Vex cube, which you do not want. Let's talk about another important mechanic real quick, aka the eyes mechanic. If you're defending one of the outer totems, every now and then the boss might show up to your area and start harassing you. If that happens, don't panic. Avoid him and continue ad clearing, but be aware that he does have a mechanic that you need to watch. If he parks himself a few feet from the totem, he'll essentially begin to regurgitate a weird white blob onto the floor. You'll have to run into that blob fast because it is a wipe mechanic. If nobody gets there in a few seconds, everyone will die. But once you've touched the white blob, you will now have to look at the boss. He'll spread out his flower petals, revealing 3 glowing red eyes to you. You'll now have to shoot and destroy all 3 of those eyes very quickly, like quicker than you might think. I strongly recommend bringing a hard-hitting special weapon to the encounter that can break those eyes fast, because again, if you take too long, you will die. On mouse and keyboard, I like using a sniper, but my wife, who plays on controller with a lowish sensitivity, got the job done with Civil Discourse, aka the blaster hand cannon. Technically, if someone is in the area with you, they can help you shoot the eyes if you tell them which ones to shoot, either inner or outer. But I recommend not relying on that and just improving the speed at which you break the eyes solo. It really should be a one-person job because everyone else on the map needs to defend their totems. By the way, after successfully jumping into the goo pile to prevent the wipe mechanic and shoot the boss in the eyes, your Guardian will now have a voltaic overflow debuff timer on their HUD. That just means you won't be able to stand in his regurgitated goo pile again until that timer goes away. So if he comes back to your totem and barfs again, somebody else will have to come through the teleporter and help you. One more thing to talk about before DPS, the moats, which are only carried by yellow bar Vex called Malignant Moat Bearers. When killed, they will drop 5 Vex moats on the ground that someone on the fire team will need to pick up and bring over to the center of the map and dunk into a pillar. Now, you can do it however you want, but my team likes to do it like so. 5 players on the team each have the job of defending each of the totems, and the 6th player on the fire team is basically the roaming helper / moat dunker. Basically, the way we do it is if any totem defender sees the moat carrying Vex, they call it out on the mic, and the roaming helper pops over through the teleporter, kills the moat carrying Vex, and collects the moats to bring back back to the center to be dunked. Feel free to do it differently, but I find that strat to be very easy. So when the encounter is in full swing, everyone should be defending their totems and refreshing their enlightened buff as needed. Shoot the boss in the eyes as needed and call for the roaming player to come over and kill the moat holding Vex as needed. When enough moats have been dunked into the center pillar, you'll see text that says the Consecrated Mind is drawn to the overloaded relay. That means it's officially time to start DPS. Don't run to the middle of the map, use the teleporters to get there faster, and wait for the boss to show up. You'll first need to shoot and break all of his glowing red eyes as he floats in front of you. When you finish, you'll then officially be able to damage him by shooting him in the center of his body in the glowing white eye. He'll begin to move away from you, so long-range DPS is recommended, but try to just move with him as best you can as he floats further and further away from you. When you can't damage him anymore, everyone go back to your section and take it from the top. Keep going until he is dead, and congratulations, maybe the trickiest encounter is now over. Alright, next up is Morgeth. Like the other two encounters we just went over, the Morgeth fight is kind of a hybrid of two encounters mashed into one. Let's familiarize ourselves with the area, although I gotta be honest, this might be the most straightforward area out of the bunch. Morgeth hangs out at the back of the encounter at the top of the staircase, but the thing you really need to keep your eyes peeled for are these. Taken Strength. These are debuffs that I will explain shortly, but the first one will always spawn in front of Morgeth, and as the encounter goes along, others will eventually spawn in at random locations. Here's how Taken Strength works. By jumping through them, you collect the Taken Strength, and you'll be able to see them on the bottom left-hand corner of your HUD. You can only ever grab 2 Taken Strength and no more than that, because if you ever try to grab a third at any point in the encounter when your strength is already at ×2, you will die. So again, no more than 2 ever. The encounter will begin when someone grabs the Taken Strength in front of Morgeth. At that point, everyone can hang out and kill Taken until more Taken Strength begin to spawn randomly around the area. Whoever grabbed that first Taken Strength should now grab a second. Shortly after they do that, Morgeth will start to raise one of his glowing hands into the air. When he does, anyone on the battlefield who is currently holding ×2 Taken Strength will become frozen in place, completely unable to move. A different player will have to take a Taken Captain and grab their dropped item called Taken Essence, and while holding that item, they'll need to run over to the player frozen in place and hit whatever their grenade button is to detonate the Taken Essence. 3 things will then happen immediately. 1. The frozen player will become unfrozen. 2. The player who detonated the Taken Essence will steal all of the Taken Strength held by the frozen player. And 3. Both players will immediately get teleported into the Heart of Riven, an entirely separate area that is very small and filled with both enemies and several orbs of Taken Strength. Aside from needing to fight off all the Taken in the area, they will now have a new side mechanic to do right away. The player who detonated the Taken Essence will now have a debuff on their HUD called Taken Essence Antumbra. Don't get intimidated, long debuff name, but it ain't like the vault encounter. It basically just means that the player has the ability to see symbols on the Taken Strength in the area. The player who was frozen in place and then got freed now needs to run around and grab 2 Taken Strength debuffs, and they have to make sure to not pick up the wrong ones, because if they do, they will die. Well, wait, how do you know which Taken Strengths are, quote, the wrong ones? Great question. Back in the original encounter area, the rest of the fire team will still be fighting the Taken. They need to look on the wall back behind Morgeth, and they should see 2 Taken symbols that they should call out loud. In a nutshell, whatever symbols get called out loud, that represents the Taken Strength inside the Heart of Riven that should be not picked up. For example, in this clip, I'm leading my teammate around in the Heart of Riven, and I hear my teammates call out Cloud Snake and Suicide Dragon. I therefore know that those symbols are to be avoided, so I literally look for any other Taken Strength on the field with a different symbol, guide my teammate to 2 of them and say, hey, pick up this Taken Strength, and then pick up that Taken Strength, because again, I can see the symbols and they cannot. After your teammate has been instructed to pick up 2 Taken Strengths that will not kill them, basically the same thing will happen all over again to 2 different guardians on your fire team. What I mean by that is, while all that was going on, 2 other guardians on your fire team should be doing the same thing you did earlier, aka one of them grabs the Taken Strength in the outside world and gets frozen in place by Morgeth, while the other grabs the Taken Essence, runs over and taps the grenade button so both of them get teleported into the heart of Riven. Once again, the player who was formerly frozen will need to pick up 2 new taken strengths, being sure to avoid the quote, wrong ones that will get them killed. I should mention at this point, if you never did the Last Wish raid and are unfamiliar with the symbol callouts, there is a wide range of community symbol callout charts that you can use with your team. And if I'm being completely honest, you don't even need them. Just make up callouts on the spot by describing what you see. For example, bird on branch, dragon breathing fire to the left, and so on. Anyway, back in the outside world, players will now have to call out 2 additional symbols on the wall behind Morgeth. Keep in mind, I said 2 additional symbols, meaning the player who just got teleported into the heart of Riven will have 4 symbols total that they will need to avoid. Again, they will need to be guided by a player inside the heart who has the Taken Essence and Tumbra buff. Like before, the player will look around, see what symbols to avoid, and then say something like, hey, come over here, grab this Taken Strength right here, and make sure they grab 2 without dying. When the final 2 teammates on the fire team do the whole song and dance of grab 2 Taken Strength, get frozen by Morgeth, grab the Riven Eye, get teleported into the heart of Riven, they will not have to play the symbol game a 3rd time, thankfully. But when the final 2 players get teleported inside, Morgeth will too, and everybody should now get ready for DPS. There will be 1 brand new Taken Strength that spawns right next to Morgeth once he has been teleported inside. Whoever doesn't have ×2 Taken Strength, aka the final player on the team who got frozen and teleported in, can now grab the final Taken Strength in front of Morgeth, and DPS will begin. Group up and start shooting Morgeth in his large bubbling green spots. While doing this, be sure to pay attention to either the amassed strength meter at the top of your screen, or if you like, the text in the bottom left-hand corner that will occasionally tell you what % of strength Morgeth is at. This is very important to keep an eye on, because if Morgeth ever gets to 100% strength, not just during DPS, but at literally any point in the encounter, your entire fire team will die. During DPS, one player on the team will eventually have to break away from dealing damage to ensure that Morgeth does not reach 100% strength and kill everybody. Basically, the player who breaks away from DPS is looking for an Eye of Riven, which can be dropped by a Taken named Eye of Riven. One of these Taken will be running around with the other Taken in the area before DPS even begins. You can try to keep him alive if you like, but if you accidentally killed him way too early and the item despawned, don't worry, another Eye of Riven should spawn into the area right when DPS begins. Ideally, you start doing DPS near the Eye of Riven item just to make things easier. Whoever is the team's designated Stop Morgeth from Wiping Everybody player should stop DPSing Morgeth when he's gained around 80% strength. They should then find and grab the Eye of Riven and then aim it at Morgeth and hit whatever their super button is. They'll fire a Taken Blast at Morgeth and prevent him from hitting his wipe mechanic, but they'll also end DPS by doing that and basically reset the encounter back to square one. After that, it is rinse and repeat, but with an added twist. When you get to your next DPS stage and take Morgeth all the way down to his last little chunk of health, you will enter his final stand mode and teleport far away, leaving a Taken portal behind. Jump into the portal and you'll now have to go through a long Taken jumping puzzle to reach Morgeth, who awaits you at the very end. This goes without saying, but be extremely careful while doing this. If you die, you can get revived at the end of the jumping puzzle, but I'd still try to avoid it, especially if your team is low on revive tokens. When you get to the end of the jumping puzzle, not only will Morgeth be there, but there will be several new Taken strength as well. You need to grab all of those Taken strengths off the field as fast as you can, because until you grab them all, you won't be able to damage Morgeth. So grab them all, keeping in mind that each individual player can grab no more than 2 and then DPS one more time. And if you want to be optimal, whoever gets there first should spread out and get the Taken strength at the far end of the area to save time. Keep shooting Morgeth until he is dead. GG. All right, next up is Insurrection Prime. Let's familiarize ourselves with the area, which is actually quite large. Try to think of it like this. There are 2 main sections of the map, an above ground section, aka when you're out on the street and can see buildings and the boss, and an underground section where you'll be able to run around downstairs underneath the streets. Before we divide your fire team up into teams, we should very quickly talk about all the roles in the encounter because there are a few. Those roles are the map guy, which is just 1 player, team berserker, which is 2 players, and team underground, which is 3 players. Keep in mind that later in the encounter, everyone will have to shuffle their roles, but we'll get to that in a minute. Starting with the map guy. The area where your fire team spawns in will contain a holographic map of the entire above ground area. The designated map guy is going to stay in the map room and basically call all the shots for the above ground players, guiding them on where to go. Here's a quick breakdown on how to read the map. The yellow circles on the map are guardians, aka your fire team. The green squares are locations where you will eventually be able to carry and deposit your radiant batteries. There are only 3 green square locations and they never move or change in any way. Eventually they will spawn tanks, but more on that later. The orange triangles are berserkers, aka yellow health bar fallen. The goal of the map guy is to read the map and identify the correct berserker on the map who needs to be killed. As you can see, there are several orange triangles on the holo map, but only one of them has a giant glowing orange orb above them. That is the correct berserker who needs to die. To keep things simple, I recommend the map guy refers to the far end of the map as north, the right side as east, the left as west, and the bottom as south. Therefore, in this particular example, the correct berserker who needs to die is over there on the far left end of the map, so I call out that the special berserker is in the building on the far west. So now that the map guy has called out the correct berserker, let's flip over real quick and talk about Team Berserker. As mentioned, Team Berserker will await the call out from the map guy on where the correct berserker is that needs to die. When they've found him, they need to defeat him in a particular way. That way is, both players need to get close to the berserker, and when they do, he'll deploy a weird bubble shield. While making sure you're inside the bubble shield, the berserker's chest armor will open up. He'll have 2 weak points exposed, one on the very front of his chest and the other behind him on his back. One player will need to stand in front of the berserker and break the weak point on his chest, while the other player stands behind the berserker and breaks the weak point on their back. You will also have to do this at the same time, so just be ready to shoot when your partner is ready. When both weak points have been broken, then the berserker will de-shield and Team Berserker will be able to kill him. When the berserker dies, it will drop 2 radiant batteries on the ground. Team Berserker will now need to pick up both of those batteries, but they should do so one at a time to avoid confusing the map guy. On that note, why don't we jump back over to the map guy. At this point, the map guy will see that the berserker is dead, and as Team Berserker picks up the radiant batteries off his body, their icons will now change on the holo map. Their icons will now have small circles above them. What those circles tell you is where that particular player needs to go in order to properly dunk their radiant battery. In this particular example, the Guardian who has 3 dots above his head needs to dunk his battery into the green square in the southwest, which also has 3 dots above it, while the Guardian with 1 circle above her head needs to dunk her radiant battery here at the northmost green square, which also has 1 dot above it. Again, this will need to be communicated all by the map guy. To repeat, we like to have Team Berserker pick up their batteries slowly, one at a time, so the map guy can more clearly tell who is who and tell both players where to go a bit more easily. After Team Berserker has successfully dunked their radiant batteries, they will get a debuff on their HUD called Ionized. All that debuff means is that particular player won't be able to pick up a new radiant battery until the timer completely goes away. And because more batteries need to be collected and dunked, but both players on Team Berserker now have cooldowns and can't pick up new batteries just yet, what needs to happen now is that Team Above Ground and Team Underground need to entirely switch. And on that note, why don't we talk about the job of Team Underground. Rewinding time a little bit, when the encounter first begins, the boss will begin stomping around the map, shooting everybody and being annoying. While he's doing that, you'll notice he has a white glowing shield covering his entire body. The first thing Team Underground should do before eventually going underground is to shoot and break 6 weak points located all over the boss's body. There should be 2 on his knees, 2 on his ribs on either side of his body, of course, and then finally 2 on his back shoulder blades behind him. Team Underground should work together in shooting and breaking all of those before doing anything else. You'll know they're all broken properly when the boss no longer glows white. When his shield has been powered down, Team Underground should now find one of the big 4 holes near the centermost area of the map and head down underground. While down there, Team Underground needs to run and look for various fallen machines that look like this. By running up close to one, it will open itself up and reveal one of 3 shapes, either a triangle, a circle, or a square. One of the machines may appear to be broken and will rapidly cycle through all of the shapes. That machine is bad and should be avoided at all costs. Do not interact with it. But anyway, while moving around downstairs, Team Underground should each position themselves in front of one of the shape machines. When every player is standing in front of a shape machine, they can all melee the shape, and when they've done so, they will all get a buff on their HUD. It will be either continuous, aka the circle buff, angular, aka the triangle buff, or parallel, aka the square buff. I know those words are long and annoying, so most players will abbreviate them as C, A, and P. Also, these buffs will be important for the damage phase, but we'll get to that a bit later. One thing to know about these buffs right now, though, is that if players have different buffs, then they'll want to make sure that they don't get too close to each other, aka a player with the C buff should never get too close to a player with the A or the P buff, because if they do, both players will start taking damage repeatedly. So for now, keep your distance. Once Team Underground has their buffs, they'll want to head back outside, but before they can, they'll have to wait to get freed, because the way they went underground should now be blocked by a wall of electric current. Team Above Ground will need to find a large servitor floating somewhere on one of the streets and kill it. When the big servitor is dead, then the electric current will then disappear for Team Underground and they can all safely come back upstairs. Okay, when Team Berserker has successfully dunked both of their Radiant batteries and Team Underground has gotten all of their buffs and come back upstairs, then both teams now need to swap roles entirely. Meaning, the team that started Underground will now need to divide themselves into one map reader and two Berserker killers, while the team that started Above Ground will now need to head down Underground so they can get buffs as well. You may want to talk about who wants to transition into what role when Team Underground eventually comes upstairs, aka who will become the new map guy and who will be the new Berserker killers. You might want to do that in advance. Other than that, it's the same as before. The map guy helps locate the Berserker who needs to die and calls out his location. Team Berserker goes there, shoots him in the back and front of his chest plate to kill him. They grab his batteries and dunk them into the correct green square location. Meanwhile, the players who are now underground should be running around, each standing in front of one shape, and then when everybody is ready, they melee the shape and collect their buff. When 4 batteries total have been successfully dunked into the correct dunking locations above ground, then 3 Drake tanks will spawn in at the battery dunking locations. Making sure that Team Underground has been freed and everyone is back up above ground, everyone can get ready for DPS. When everyone is upstairs and ready, any player in a Drake tank can fire a tank shot at the boss, and that will officially begin DPS. And on that note, why don't we talk about DPS? Dealing damage is going to be tricky, not because the boss is difficult to shoot, but because players need to stand in a very particular formation during the DPS phase. Take a look at this diagram. When players are ready to deal DPS, your fire team is basically going to form a flying V formation, you know, like how geese or ducks fly. 2 players will be up at the tip of the flying V, with 2 players off to the left and slightly back, and 2 players off to the right and slightly back. But it can't just be any 2 players. We're going to position everybody so that the person they're standing next to has the matching letter buff. aka the 2 players with the C buff will be standing here on the left, the 2 players with the A buff will be standing at the tip of the flying V, and the 2 players with the P buff will stand here off to the right. Check it. In-game, it should look exactly like this. Looking up at my radar in the top left corner, the 2 C buffed players are over there on the left, the 2 A buff players are in the middle at the front of the flying V, and the 2 P buffed players, one of them being me, is off to the back right. When you're in this formation, you can deal damage to the boss by shooting the servitor in the dead center of his body. While you're dealing damage, be sure to pay extra attention to this part of the boss's body, basically his top left shoulder. When dealing damage, you might notice that shoulder glowing brighter and brighter and then eventually exploding into an EMP. When that explosion happens, players on the fire team may or may not have had their buffs completely swapped with another player. So when that explosion does happen, double check to see if your buff has changed or remained the same. If it remained the same, then you stay where you are in the flying V, but if your buff has changed, then you will need to reposition yourself at a new point in the flying V. Just remember the position of where each letter should be standing. From left to right, it should be CAP. Players getting their buff shuffled around should happen multiple times during the DPS phase, by the way, so always be sure that you're paying attention and be on the lookout for that shoulder explosion / EMP. When DPS is over, everybody go back to square one and do it all over again. Here's a couple random tips for the encounter that may help you. Random tip number 1, if the map reader ever notices that their map has completely vanished, it means a servitor has wandered into the map room and needs to die. When the servitor is killed, the holographic map will reappear. Random tip number 2, the boss has 2 red canisters on his body that can be shot and broken. Shooting and breaking one of those canisters will prevent him from using a particular attack on the fire team. So if you're feeling very harassed by the boss's attacks, you can shoot and break those canisters. Random tip number 3, the encounter begins when players kill several fallen, including one berserker who drops a battery that needs to be taken back and dunked into the terminal in the map room. The player who does that should be the first map reader, because remember that after dunking a battery, they will be hit with an ionized debuff and won't be able to pick up another battery for around 2 minutes. The map guy does not need to worry about that particular debuff, so he should be the first person to dunk and launch the encounter. Random tip number 4, and maybe the most important, before the encounter even begins, your team should literally pre-plan out every role, meaning you should decide not only who is going to be team above ground and team underground, but you should also choose who will be getting each letter buff on each team. For example, before we even started the encounter, I was placed on team underground and also decided in advance that I was going to be grabbing the parallel buff, aka the letter P buff. Then when I was underground looking to collect my buff, I waited until I found the square symbol machine, because the square symbol gives the parallel, aka the letter P buff. Other than that, it is rinse and repeat. As long as you are positioned in the correct location in the flying V during the damage phase, you should be made in the shade. Keep going until the boss is dead. Alright, a brief section at the end of the video for recommended DPS loadouts. Now, I want to point out that this is a guide for players who want to just clear the gauntlet at the base level. If people want a different video with loadout recommendations for 5 feet gauntlet, then let me know. That being said, if you just want to know what you should run for a standard clear, this should be GG easy. Literally every encounter in Pantheon can be cleared very easily with linear fusion rifles. I recommend that 5 players on the team should rock their best God roll linear fusion rifle, and if you don't have a God rolled LFR, just use the Queenbreaker, remembering to use the combat sights, aka the little 3-round burst shot thing. 1 player on the fire team should have a debuff option, and I'm going to hard recommend that weapon be Fafnir, the newest exotic linear fusion rifle, which is insanely good. I've made a short video detailing why this is a great weapon, but you can essentially use it to apply a repeated 30% debuff to any boss from long range. You should be rocking armor that has both a high super stat and a high weapon stat during DPS. Hopefully you have some armor with the powerhouse archetype laying around. That should be perfect. Your leg armor should also have surges, void weapon surges if you're rocking Fafnir, or arc weapon surges if you're rocking Queenbreaker. You get the idea. Don't forget to throw on some time dilation mods and a powerful attraction mod onto your class armor. If you want to keep it ultra easy, my class recommendations are as follows. Warlocks can run either Solar with Well of Radiance and Boots of the Assembler, but if the team is Warlock heavy for some reason, then other Warlocks can run a Prismatic Buddy build featuring Getaway Artist. Hunters can feel free to wear Celestial Nighthawk Golden Gun, or, believe it or not, Shards of Galanor Blade Barrage, which is apparently really goddamn hot right now. Titans should be A-okay with running Arc and Curious of the Falling Star, along with Thunder Crash and Storm's Keep. If you have any additional loadout recommendations, feel free to share them down below. Good luck out there. Thanks very much for watching. Peace.